Okay, so remember that we just did a 0-degree elevation, right? So we've cut all the perimeter, now we're moving on to long layers, okay? So I want you to now think about cutting vertically all the way around the head. So if I drew a line straight down and did a long rectangle and pivoted all the way around my entire head, that's all we're gonna do, okay? So again, I would start in the back, okay? I would make sure that I have, it almost looks like I always say they look like a beach ball from the top. So that it's starting at a point but ends at more of a triangular subsection. And you don't need to pin these out of the way, but I would definitely section them off so that they're uniform. So when I do my sections, I'll just twist them like this. You're gonna have 5 to 7 subsections in the back, because the same rule applies whether I'm cutting vertically or horizontally, right? I still don't want to get a big old 3-inch chunk and just whack it off, because then it's gonna look horrible, correct? So same thing, I want to take small slices just like I would if I was cutting horizontally, okay? Still, it's gonna be based on density. Of course, mannequins aren't, extremely dense. They're kind of pretty thin on the scalp as far as I'm concerned. Okay, and then when we get around the sides, we're gonna have another, probably 3 pieces. Can you basically see what I'm doing here? And I don't think you need to section it. You could if you really, really wanted to, but I don't think you need to. Okay. So we know from regular haircutting class that there's a 0, a 45 degree, what else? 90? 180. And then that one right here between 180 and 90 was like 135, something like that. So all I ever say is that I'm connecting the dots, okay? I want to just make sure that everything is blended. If I take 3 sections on this side, I need to take 3 sections on this side. And of course, you should get to the place where you could just cut this at a 90-degree angle. You don't have to section like this, but I like to do it so visually you can see what I'm doing. So I'm basically going to pull every single one of these all the way around out at a 90-degree angle and cut off the excess without cutting the perimeter, without cutting the length at all, okay? And this is just basically going to turn my blunt 0 into more of a having more texture at the bottom. It's going to be something that when you curl it, you're going to have layers from about here down, okay? All right. So I know that we talk about degrees in our book, okay? But when I talk about where we're elevating, I always refer to it as a clock, okay? So when we talked about our 90 originally, if you're looking at a person's head, let's see if I can do this way. Okay, then this, if I pull that hair straight up, it's 180 degrees, right? I'm also pulling it like at 12 o'clock, right? here would be 90 degrees, but it's also pointing at 3. Yes? And I do it 12, 1, and 3 because I'm right-handed. So I'm going to pull it at 12, 1:30, and 3 o'clock for me. Okay? If you're left-handed, well, obviously you're going to be on this side. Okay? But think of it as a clock because you really do need to be thinking about if it's straight up, then you are pulling it straight up as if you are, it's 12 o'clock noon. Okay? Straight out to the side is 3. But obviously my guide is going to travel. So I'm staying at 3 o'clock the whole time in this midsection, going all the way around her head. So I'm going to constantly pull that hair out at the same degree all over. Okay? And it doesn't even matter because I could grab this whole side and cut it. Okay? I'm not going to mess with the perimeter because that's going to be longer. And if I cut this, everything on top I want to cut. So you don't have to worry as much about cutting the wrong thing. Does that make sense? As long as you are pulling it out consistently at 3 o'clock. If you start to go here on this side and here on this side and here on this side, well, yeah, it's going to be uneven, correct? So rather, I visualize things better by saying it's at 3 o'clock. Because I can go straight out to 3 rather than trying to figure out what a 90-degree angle is. I don't know. To me, it makes more sense that way. So I say 12, 1:30, 3 o'clock. Okay? If I do anything down here at all, it may be to 4:30 or 5, but I hardly ever go at that angle down here. Because I really don't like to layer anything below the occipital bone. Okay? Okay, so already done my 0. I've done my subsections all the way around so you can see. Okay? I'm going to just grab each one of these, starting in the back, in the center, work my way to the ear, come back, come this way, and then do the front. Okay? And all I'm doing is I'm taking my whole section here, subsection, I'm bringing it all out at 3 o'clock. And what I'm focusing on is everything above the occipital because this is going to fall out and you're going to see this is the perimeter of my haircut, right? So this is the length that she wants. So I'm not going to cut into that a whole lot. That was abrupt. Sorry on the video. Okay, so when I pull this out, I'm pulling this whole slice here at 3 o'clock, correct? I'm not wadding it up into a tiny little bundle here. I'm going to leave it all flat. Where this shortest piece is, I should say, that is the length of my haircut, so I don't want to cut that. But that's where I'm going to go up. So all of this excess above that, that's what I'm cutting off. Okay, I'm going to go palm to palm and cut. Okay, you are going to have to get uncomfortable. Okay, I don't want you to get this and twist it out of place and get comfortable and cut it down here. Okay, so try your best to leave it up here, pull it out, and just cut a straight line right here. You're cutting that excess off. That is it. Okay? And you can see now, here's my shortest layer, here's my longest, my length that I haven't messed with at all. Okay? So you can do one of two ways. I don't care if you hold this hair with your palm up, you can do that. But no matter what, you are cutting on the opposite side of that person's hand. I'm not cutting close to the scalp, I'm cutting on the other side of my hand. Okay? So I'm not going to cut right here, correct? I'm going to cut over here. The other thing is, I don't want you bending your wrist. okay? No matter what, you cannot bend your wrist. So if I have to stand sideways and cut hair, then that's what I want to do. If you want to do this and point cut it, you can point cut it. But both my wrists are straight, correct? Okay. So, you feel more comfortable cutting it this way? That's fine too. Just keep in mind, I'm not cutting on this side close to the scalp, I'm cutting on this side. Both my wrists are straight, right? Okay. Only thing I don't want to see you do when you do it this way is I don't want you pushing the hair down. Okay, we tend to do that with our elbow, again, because it's kind of hard to hold it up high. So, but you have to still hold all that hair out at 3 o'clock from here to here, okay? So, you can do it up here like this, that's fine, or you can do it like this, that's fine too. Okay? Either way, one of these shoulders is going to be up here, okay? So, just keep that in mind. You're just bringing all this hair out at 3 o'clock and cutting it just straight up and down without any finger angle or cutting angle at all. It's just a vertical cutting angle. Do you understand what I mean when I say vertical cutting angle? Okay, so I'm not cutting it at a diagonal, in or out, I'm just cutting it straight up and down vertically. And all I've done is taken the excess and cut it. Okay. Now I'm going to move to my next section. I'm pulling hair from the center of my subsection. So right where it naturally falls, that's where I'm going to cut it. That means I'm traveling, right? So I'm not going to pull this hair back here and cut it over here because I'm over directing it because it naturally falls here, right? So I want to pull it out straight from where it naturally falls at my 3 o'clock. You can let that bottom fall out if you want to. You can see where that perimeter starts to fall out. That's where I want to cut it. Any questions about this so far? We're all good. Okay, and I'm going to keep working around. So my next subsection, I'm combing it super nice and neat. Now, the previous hair that you already cut, you can have some of that as your guide now, okay? So when I take a little sliver of that, I can have it as a guide as well as the hair underneath. So I can see my guide from what I previously cut, and now I'm going to cut this. And then I'm going to stop right behind that ear. I don't want to go into the side of the hair just yet. This piece that's right behind the ear, I tend to over direct it a little bit just so that, because I'm losing the length in the nape now, okay? So if I took all of this and cut it, well, there is no nape area necessarily. So if I cut too deep, then I'm gonna leave a hole here where there's no length right here, okay? So I do over direct this last piece, which is right behind the ear. Rather than cutting it where it naturally falls, which is over here, I just scoot it back a little bit. Buy myself a little bit of length, okay? Okay, and then I'm going to go back to my center and work my way this way. See where my guide is? Right there. Then I can stop and know that's where I'm going to cut it. Still pulling everything at a 90-degree angle where it naturally falls, right? And that means that every time I take a new section, my body's moving over 2 inches, right? Because I'm traveling. See where that length is? That's where I start. I go straight up from there. And then my last piece right here by the ear, I'm going to go back a little bit further to my previous section, just so I don't cut too deep into that length of the hair right here. Okay, now I'm going to go to the sides. My length shouldn't be cut at all. I should still be able to clearly see a 0 at the bottom. So I haven't messed with the length at all. I'm only cutting the interior. Okay? You still with me? Make sense? Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Bring it straight out. Find my guide. Cut these last couple of inches off where it naturally falls. Make sure you're holding that hair at 3 o'clock and just cutting straight up. Same thing as I get around the face, this last piece, I'm going to bring it back. I tend to over direct it just a little bit. That way I know I haven't cut too deeply around her face. I can always go back in and fine tune my face frame or my fringe area. And see, you got to think, this doesn't have hardly any length in it at all. So I want to be real careful not to cut too much length off of that front section. So rather than bring it here where it naturally falls, I'm going to pull it right back to my midsection. Go to this side, and I'm basically my arm really never changes because I'm always going to cut with my right hand. My left hand's always going to be my control hand. So my arm, I can almost do muscle memory where it'll stop in the same place every single section. So if you get to where you're really controlled and you're thinking about your movements, you're going to develop muscle memory, and you're going to be able to do this with your eyes closed. There's my guide. And all I've done is create some long layers around her hair vertically. I like to cut vertically. A lot of people will cut horizontally, but it's very hard to blend horizontal layers. Okay, because it's going to lay exactly how you cut it. So you cut a big old chunk straight across, it's going to be very hard to make that a soft line. Where if you do a lot of little vertical pieces, then it's going to blend a lot better. You always want to make sure you can see your guide from your previous section in the section that you're cutting. So you should definitely be able to hold a tiny piece of what you previously cut, pull it into your next section and hold it there so you can see that you're matching that hair from before. Pulling it a little bit back or farther away from our face again, just to make sure I don't cut it too short. Okay. Okay, this is long layers for me. This is how I like to cut long layers. Okay. Now, all you would do after this, depending on density, okay, let's say this top layer now is super thud. Like if we cut Deanna's hair, she's got a ton of density, right? So if I just take all this out and cut it, then this top layer is very thick on her. So it's going to be heavy. And all this is going to be layered, and this is going to be a big mushroom, right? So in that case, you just go up. We just did 3 o'clock, so what would we do next? $130? Right? I wouldn't drastically jump to cutting it at 12 o'clock, but maybe 1:30. We could pull up another section vertically, take off another little inch, and then it would round that off a little bit more, right? Because think about, basically we're cutting here, here, right? And so we're gonna make a round line, correct? So it'd be softer. So if this was too blunt, I could go back in, go to my next section right up here, horseshoe section, all the way around, just like I just did, but instead of 3 o'clock, I'm gonna go to 1:30 now. And just make that a little bit softer. Again, in the back, I'm doing like a little pie-shaped piece. Doesn't even matter how deep I go because all that's gonna fall out. This is my guide right here. So now, if I want to soften that line, all I got to do now is cut this inch off. See, so I'm going to create that round softness now to where this top layer is even lighter now. Y'all see that? Kind of, sort of. Does that make sense? We understanding it? I'm just shaking your head, yes? Okay. So all I want you to do for this haircut is the 90 all the way around, leaving your 0 exactly like you cut it last week, okay? Then I want you to move up to 130 and just cut that last little inch off the top all the way around. Same thing, okay? You're just taking vertical sections all the way around, pulling it up, and where it naturally is going to fall, take that last little half inch off, or inch. I think it is about an inch. For this mannequin, it's an inch. So there it is right there. You see how I'm pulling that hair to 130? Well, for me, it's 130. For you, it might be 1030, right? Okay. So I already did the whole back. Up in the front. There's my little extra inch. And you're always cutting parallel to the scalp once you move up, okay? So if here I'm going vertical, my cutting line was vertical, here I'm gonna cut parallel to the scalp, okay? So if I'm holding it here, I'm gonna cut it here. That way I know I'm not cutting too much off. Just softening that, blending that little line right there. Right where it naturally falls, all the way around. Think we can do this? I can tell you this is 90% of what I do at the salon. But you have to think, if I'm cutting, you know, Colin's hair. I cut Colin's hair this weekend, right? Yeah. Okay. So the only thing I did differently on Colin was that I cut the top at a 12 o'clock. Okay. So that's the only thing I went, that extra step, and I cut this at 12 o'clock. I did a 180. I cut his whole top section the length that he wanted, and then I did my 130 all the way around to blend with the sides that were cut at a 90 all the way around. And then in the nape area, I just went as close as I could with my shears and my fingers, so I didn't have to use clippers on him, but I'm still cutting at a 90 all the way around. And then I did my blending from here, did my 12 o'clock here. So even for a men's cut, it's the same thing. It's 12, it's 1:30, it's 3 o'clock. Whatever you do in the nape. Okay? All right. So I want y'all to do this haircut this week. So you should not have to cut another 0 unless you're worried that your 0 doesn't look good. Okay? But when I go to blow dry this or, you know, style it or whatever, you know, my 0 shouldn't be interrupted. I should still have a nice thick full 0 at the bottom. So I haven't disturbed that or cut too deep into it or anything to where I've lost the length and the integrity of the length. So it isn't good to have 24-inch hair. We've all seen those nasty extensions, right? That you're like, ooh, these extensions are cheap. They're 24 inches, but the last 6 inches is 3 hairs, right? Okay, so we've seen the difference between a good 24-inch extension. It's nice and thick and full at the bottom. And then those extensions that say they're 24 inches, but you got to cut 6 inches off because it's so thin and ratty at the bottom. Okay, that's what we don't want. Okay, so we're still maintaining that our 0 looks thick and full and pretty. So by doing those layers at a 90-degree angle, we're softening the blunt edge at the bottom and taking some weight off so it doesn't look like a bell. But at the same time, we're leaving the integrity of the length. Does that make sense? Okay. I say that a lot. I'm hoping that it makes sense. All right. That is what I want you to do for this week's haircut. Okay? And 2 applications, bottle hair color.